morning. I feel like a bit of an interloper. I'm not a designer per se. I'm a social scientist, a human geographer, a tourism academic, and I did a PhD in wine consumption. So who's the winner here? But over the last 4 years I've been teaching on a program which uses design to teach culinary arts. And we use design practice and design principles, design methodology and thinking to get students to break away from the traditional approach to food, which is, I'm the master, you learn my recipe, you cook my recipe, and I'll assess you on that recipe. So we move radically away from that. I deal then largely with something that is quite ephemeral, something that disappears in a moment, and something which is small C culture, not big C culture. So it's the everyday, the banal, if you like. So what better thing to talk about than coffee and the cafe? I should have put question marks on all of my titles for all of my slides, because this is a conversation, a dialogue I'm having in my head, and hopefully I can have with some of you as we leave after this session. So, where does the New Zealand cafe culture come from? I first started writing about New Zealand cafe culture in about 1998, and during the 1990s we saw this massive explosion in coffee, eating outside, engaging with a barista-made coffee and the likes. And including in the early 1990s, Jenny Shipley, the then Prime Minister, actually highlighted the importance of coffee culture and cafe culture to the growth of New Zealand society. So where's it come from? It's come from travel, effectively. In Australia, this was a slow evolutionary process of developing a cuisine, a culture around coffee and cafes and informality as waves of immigrants came into Australia. In New Zealand, it was much more about us going on our OE and bringing those things back with us. So a desire from consumers for a greater range of ingredients, for coffee that tasted good, and for a range of experiences of eating and dining that were quite different to what we've been used to. These were travels in Europe, travels in Asia, travels through the Middle East, Africa, and around the world. The cafe itself, the place we go to for coffee, has its antecedents in, or its roots in the UK and the US. Tea rooms from the UK and milk bars from the US. Well, so I thought, until recently I started reading a little bit more about it. And believe it or not, Greek immigrants and Yugoslavian immigrants had a massive role to play in transforming these spaces into what we came to know as cafes and, came to know as milk bars and tea rooms. That cringeworthy cuisine, if you like. This guy, David Burton, wrote in the 1990s about how cringeworthy it was, and several journalists who were here on a travel writing event, they wrote about the rock-hard cuisine and how bland it was and all those sorts of things. And those things came from a community who were here, who were isolated, who actually needed something to move their lives forward. So they grabbed onto food, the thing that they could quite easily adapt, and they were very hard-nosed about it. What do people want? How can we do this cheaply? How can we live in the place that we cook this stuff? And how do we make a living out of this? And so we get Formica tables, we get cheap china and crockery, we get all of the things we kind of have in our consciousness about what the tea room is all about. And as David Burton writes here, it's our own fault that we ended up with a mediocre cuisine by the 1990s, the early 1990s. Because that's what we demanded. It talks about steak and chips with a salad on the side and some nondescript salad dressing. So via Europe, Yugoslavia, Greece, Southeast Asia, and other parts of the world, we end up here now where we've got something known as the contemporary Kiwi cafe. And what I'm going to talk about today is just how do we look at that space, the everyday around us, with a design lens to see what is there that we might be able to interrogate to help us to understand how design has influenced New Zealand and how it's expressed in the everyday. So one of the ideas I'm interested in is this notion of how cafes have latched onto iconography from our everyday culture to display this in ways that are coherent and tell a story. And that's not limited to the decor, but it's also in the food, the menus, the recipes that they design, and they develop into more modern expressions of a rice bubble cake, for example. Okay, something we're all very familiar with. We know it's very easy to make. You teach your kids to make it, but you add some millet, and it becomes something else. This is Voodoo Cafe and Larder in Queenstown, and they've used postcards from the 1950s as a backdrop. They have made a reference to the Formica tables. The Formica tables are too damn expensive these days to use in a cafe environment, but they've got a very clear connection to that description that David Burton provided before. Kevin and his number 8 wire approach to things. We see that, I certainly see that in Dunedin expressed in a number of scenarios. This place is called the Morning Magpie. Paint everything with blackboard paint, give someone some chalk, and we have ever-changing decor. He designed and built all his own lighting because the electrician was too scared to do it. Yeah. So we see this number 8 wire thing coming out time and time again, and it's been happening for quite some time in Dunedin, certainly in the cafe scene. It's quite bohemian, its expression. It's quite similar to a lot of things that are also happening in Melbourne. Any Aucklanders around? Familiar with this place? Little and Friday. I went there recently. It's this art of informality. This being able to express ourselves and be humble and just live with the fact and be comfortable with that we actually don't give a shit. You know, you go to New York. It's really hard to find a place like this. I've just come back from there where, by the way, the same questions are being asked about food design as they are about New Zealand design. Just replace the two words. And people aren't comfortable with this notion of informality and just being us. And I think the cafe is one of those spaces that allows us to do this. And Little and Friday is a great expression of that. If you don't know it, there's a fabric store as part of this. So it's actually just the front part of the fabric store. Another concept, another thing that I've been thinking about is this notion of third place. This comes from Barber's third space, which is about a common ground where we come together to share and create new things and have conversations. Oldenburg talks about this as third place, where it's a neutral ground, a leveller, everyone is the same. Conversation is the main activity. It's accessible and accommodating so that everybody is able to be part of it. There are regulars, so we get to know each other and we get to know who is the core part of this community. It's very low profile, it's that art of informality, and it's very much a playful space, a place where we're quite happy about being not too serious about things. And it's a home away from home. So this notion of hospitality and performing hospitality in a very informal environment. I see this time and time again in cafes, and Oldenburg actually sees cafes in one of these spaces. Pubs are also these types of places. This is something that I had a very brief conversation with a designer whose name escapes me from Otago University a number of years ago about the notion of multi-sensory theatre, if you like. And that if you take the sounds and smells away from the New Zealand cafe and you take the barista out of the equation, it becomes a very different beast. So there's a performativity and there's an aesthetic labour that goes alongside this. It's very deliberate in its approach. We never hide the coffee machine way at the back. It's always right out front. It's always the core part of that theatre. And I think there's a lot to be learnt and a lot to be understood yet about how all of the senses are playing in this role of changing our design identity. I deal with it every day because I teach students how to taste and how to use memory and how to use those things from the past to think about how that influences people's emotions, their behaviour, and how they act. So this comes down to the barista understanding this notion of performativity and the way people behave as part of design outcome, through to the smell, the aroma, the lighting, and so on. And architecture and interior design obviously can explore that in a number of areas. So, actually starting to form this notion that there is actually such a thing as a Kiwi cafe, and that's actually an expression of our DNA. It incorporates our design DNA. It incorporates some of those things that I've just explored, but I think it's much more complex than that. And a good example of this is exported. There are Kiwi cafes in London, everywhere you look, everywhere you turn. Someone's got the long white cloud cafe, or some reference to sheep usually. And they're everywhere. And they're Kiwis saying, actually, there's more to it than just taking our flat white to the world. There is actually an expression of our culture in the cafe and the way it's designed. And as I said, just come back from New York, and there's a Kiwiana cafe over there. It's very popular at the moment. It's in Brooklyn, and it's starting to go places. Where was instant coffee invented? Just by the by.
Invercargill.
Invercargill in 1893. So we've been innovating around coffee for more than 130 years. Is that good? I don't know, I'm just saying. So my intention here is, this is to start a conversation, hopefully, with whoever's interested. An invitation to explore this more, to sit down over a coffee, my shout. Upstairs. And if anyone is interested, I'd love to talk. Thanks.